Hello everyone, and welcome back to the F-16. Today we're going to go over and do a little bit of cockpit familiarization. Some people were asking me about kind of what all this does, and basically what I'm talking about in game. I'll say something, and not a lot, some of y'all aren't following along, and that's no fault of your own. This is a complex machine, and not many people in the world actually get to be up close and personal with it. So yeah, this might be a little bit longer of a video. We'll break it up into sections and whatnot. I'm probably going to start here on the back left and just work my way up and around. The part that's going to take me the longest is all this up here in the front, because this is all multi-function. It all does a lot of different things. And depending on what buttons I push, it'll do other things and whatnot. They can work together. If I want to manipulate certain things on here, I can use this as well, and vice versa for this screen on the right. But we'll get into that. As working here on the back left, we have like basically our testing panels. So right here on the back left, I can push this button right here, push and hold, and things will light up. The master caution, the engine fire light, and the overheat light come on, because that is my fire warning test, right? So now, if I press the next one up, there's the faults and malindicators. Every single thing in this cockpit that is able to light up will light up when I push and hold this button. And you will also hear an auditory from the bitching Betty talking to me, going through every one of her, like, basically status updates. And which I will shut up now and let you hear that.
Pull up. Altitude. Warning. Jammer. Counter. Chat flare. Low. Out. Lock. Caution. Bingo. Beta. IFS.
Okay. A little bit of visual there for you. Like I said, everything in here will light up. And she goes through her entire spiel. Alright, so next one up, we got our flight controls panel and whatnot. We can do a reset. We can, the leading edge flops lock in auto. I can lock them in a certain position or let them in auto. The LEFs are the front bits of the wings right here. They actually go up and down with certain input movements with the flight controls and airspeed. So for the F-16, it actually utilizes those to really whip the nose around and whatnot. So we leave those in auto at basically all points in time. I can also run a bit as well, which will actually make everything run through its own little test and whatnot. It'll run through a test where it moves the stabs up and down and whatnot, the rudder left and right, the LEFs will go up and down, and it does this as a test of the flight control system, and they accomplish this every time before they go for a sortie. Just below that, we have the manual trim panel. So the manual trim can be done here in the back left, or it can be done on your HOTAS via a China hat, or a 4-position switch as it's also called. So won't go too far into that. It's just a bunch of spin dials that say left wing down, right wing down, nose up, nose down, right? Pretty easy stuff there. Next up, we got our fuel. We can turn on fuel, like basically turn on and off fuel. Like, so there's an actual valve for the main fuel inlets to the engine. They'll be turned on and off via this guy with the red switch cover right here. And we use this quite a lot in the engines world for whenever I have to do engine fuel maintenance or whatnot, remove an engine, etc. I have to come up in here, turn on main power, or battery power rather, and let that valve close before I go to drain the system. Because if I don't, I'll literally just sit here and try to drain all, like, what, 6,900 pounds on the jet right now? Pretty ridiculous if you ask me. So right here we can go to tank inerting. So basically, do I want to basically cut out the tanks or not? Engine feed, off, norm, aft, and forward. Where do I want the engine to be fed from? Aft reserves, forward reserves, or normal? Let the jet decide at all or not at all. If I click this off, the engine will die as soon as it uses up all the fuel that's left in the engine feed tank. Air refuel, it's going to be open and closed section on the back of the jet back here. On the spine, you're not going to be able to see it open and close if I were to manipulate it. EPU, this is something called an emergency power unit, and it uses hydrogen gas to create a thermal reaction to spin a turbine to provide me with electrical power and very minimal hydraulics, which basically allows me to point the jet in a safe direction before I punch out of it. Or if I'm like right by a base, I can emergency land it. It's very toxic, very nasty to deal with, and it's not a good thing when it gets utilized. Because whenever that gets utilized, that means they've lost hydraulic systems, electrical power, or the engine in this case as well. Right here next to it, we got the electrical panel, main power battery off, caution reset, and you got these lights that'll light up during certain failures and whatnot, or during battery, main gen light, standby gen light. So basically this is like a status panel. Moving on up forward from it, if I can get my head in a position to see it, this is going to be the engine, basically the starter and engine control, right? So we got AV reset. If you have a problem with your afterburner, you can click that forward and reset it to give it another shot, or you can pull back to for you to say, I want you to start recording data for my engines, dudes, because the engine's acting really stupid. Max power, we don't touch that. That's sacrilege. That lets the engine operate above and beyond predetermined maximums and whatnot. And if you ever see this used, that means the pilot of the jet determined that the only way he wasn't going to die is if he literally pushed this thing to like 120% of what it's capable of. So just ahead of it, you've got the jet fuel starter. Start 1, dumps 1 bottle. Start 2, dumps both. It is a pneumatic hydro-pneumatic, whatever you want to call it. It uses both hydraulic and air pressure to spin a little turbine housed in the jet that then in turn spins the engine. And then when I give it fuel, the engine can take over once it reaches a certain ready RPM, like 20 to 28%, I believe it is. So right here behind that, you have a little red switch with engine controls, primary and secondary. Primary mode is the end-all, be-all mode. It sits here and stays there. The nozzle will move and whatnot, and there's a computer inside the engine, like on the side of it, that will literally control every aspect of engine performance. If I go to secondary mode, it turns off that computer's control. It's still on and maintains monitoring of all signals, but this whole thing basically becomes like an old carbureted car where everything is a rigged valve, basically. Alright. Continue with manual pitch, norm, override. We don't really want to mess with that either, because that is going to affect massively how this jet behaves in the air. We got a radio here. Pretty self-explanatory. Each one of these dials correlates to that number of changes. We can basically go to separate predetermined channels if I wanted to as well, if I have them set. I could turn off main, both, an ADF radio. I can have the manual volume, the mills, preset, and ground radio. Tones, squelch on and off. It's just a basic radio. Right here is the exact panel for the radio. So I can have COM 1 or Radio 1, COM 2, Radio 2, and I can manipulate their volumes, secure voice, MSL, threat, so whenever this thing starts talking to me, TF, I'm going to be honest with you, I have no idea what that is. And I can have the squelch on, off, or ground for both of those. Intercom is my communications with the ground. We actually can hook a comm cord to this jet, and there'll be someone out here talking to you and whatnot. We can control its volume right here. Or if you're in a 2-seater model, this also controls how loud you are between each other. TAC-AN, there's a little Morse code symbol that goes off if you set up TAC-AN that will tell you what station it is and whatnot. It'll actually give you heading and steering information on this little compass right here. See, I'm starting to get into the whole inputs over here deal with things in here. It can start to interrelate massively. ILS is Instrument Landing Systems. ILS is basically, if I can't see where I'm going, I can land via ILS. And the jet's instruments will literally guide me in for a landing. Kind of scary. Not exactly sure how to use it, so I try not to. Moving a little bit further back with the Ecm. I can actually load an electronic countermeasures pod on this thing and do jamming and whatnot. And each one of these correlates to a station on the pod. Standby, active, there's little yellow and green lights. I'm not sure how well that's going to appear on YouTube. We can go to standby, and I can turn them all on. I do not have a pod loaded on this jet. Or I can go to operate, and then if I were to go to CMS switch aft with this in the transmit mode, so 1 means I can transmit but still lock a target. 2, I will not be able to utilize my radar. It is prioritizing jamming or I could just, you know, not have it on at all. That is something fairly new that has been added to the game and whatnot. So there's that. Pretty cut, clean, dry, and simple there. Right here is your Iff Panel, moving back again. You have your master, standby, low, norm, emergency. You have your mode 4 code, so every jet has a code in it. Depending on what your identify friendly or foe code is going to be, you set this and you tell it to hold it or override it, or AB, which is kind of basically bypass it. CNI, control and input, backup, or UFC. If I have this set in backup, it won't display information up here. If I have a UFC, I can control the IFF, transmit whatnot through a Rdbr on the HOTAS, which will give me friendly and foe information on my FCR right here. Right below that, if I get my headset to go where it needs to, you have your external lighting. Anti-collision, or the anti-K light we like to call it. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 flashes, or A, B, and C in Morse code. You have your position lights, so the red and green lights you see on all jets due to FAA regulations, will either flash or steady, wingtail, and fuselage lighting. It's pretty, you know, pretty self-explanatory. You get your form lights, which basically let other jets that are in close proximity see you for basically nighttime operations and whatnot. You can turn those on, decrease and increase their intensity to basically show your position and orientation of your jet when visually it's not the easiest. Air refueling light inside the little spine panel back here with the air refueling door. There's a light in there. You can turn it bright or not so bright. We have the master knob for the good old lighting panel. You got norm, form lights only. Covert is in this area, so you can have covert all, covert aircraft, or covert form only, or just off. And yeah, that's it. That's actually this entire left panel. Defog, we don't really use it in the game, but in real life, this canopy can start to fog up, and it's just like hitting the defroster in your car. This is actually a manual raise and lower for the canopy in case the electrical motor for the canopy is shot. Canopy jettison. If I were to pull and yank this canopy would go bye-bye. Yeah, pretty standard stuff. Moving just forward, you have what we call the spider handle. The spider handle locks the canopy in position, and underneath it there's actually a switch, a two-position switch that makes the canopy go up and down. Right here, you have your threat warning auxiliary. We do not have it turned on right now because it'd just be making all kinds of noise and be annoying as all hell. So when we get to talking about that, we'll turn it on and it'll give us all kinds of information. Just to the right of it, you have this panel is basically says, yes, I want this on. This is what I want it to do. So, radar warning receiver, jammer, missile warning system. You got station 1, 2, chaff and flare. These are add-ons to chaff and flares. So in certain situations, you can have a second station of chaff or second station of flare, or 2 more stations of chaff or flare. Without these on, it will not dispense that countermeasure. Jet, you just get rid of the damn things. I don't know why you would want to do that. Program, you can have certain programs that will launch chaff and flare in like a sequence in certain intervals and whatnot, and it's used for different types of threats. The modes, you can have off, standby, manual, semi-auto, and bypass. Automatic means whenever this jet starts getting locked onto and whatnot, it will dispense chaff at certain intervals. Sorry, I knocked over my drink. Oh, God. Okay, we're good. Clean that up real quick. Okay. So right here, where was I at? Oh, yeah, auto. It'll automatically start dispensing chaff on its own discretion as to how often and whatnot based on being radar locked. Bypass, it will sit here and dispense as many times as I click the damn button. And it's not something you typically do on the ground because you'll literally, with flares, you'll burn holes in concrete. It burns extremely hot. Just below that, you have the Hmcs panel. This right here, if I turn that all the way up, and I look off to the left here, you can see my Hmcs symbology pop up here. We'll get into that when we start talking about the HUD and whatnot, because a lot of this information is just reflected on this symbology here. So we'll turn it off for now so it doesn't bother us. Up a little bit, It's going to be your ground controls, landing gear, and all that good shit. We got our source config, Cat 1, Cat 3. Cat 1 means I'm light, Cat 3 means I'm extremely heavy. And Cat 3 will dampen the input of my flight controls to make the jet smoother to operate, and it will prevent me from overloading and suddenly loading the wings and snapping them off if they're under a lot of load. Ground jet enable, it allows me to jet things on the ground for some reason. I suppose it has its purpose, but it's just a bad day. Brakes, channel 1, channel 2, it's a backup system. Channel 1 is your primary, channel 2 is a backup. Parking brake, anti-skid, which means no matter how hard I push on these pedals, it won't let me lock the tires off. If I turn that off, it tells me, hey buddy, something's wrong. And it tells me, right here, anti-skid. So typically when something's wrong, this master caution light will always pop on to get your attention. It says, hey, you need to look at something. And I'm like, oh, what is it? If you look here on the 32 mod, it tells you exactly what's wrong. So that is a backup for my aircraft, so it does not like me to be in it. So we'll turn that on, and there it goes away. Right here, emergency source jettison. You push this button, or the Admiral's button, whatever you want to call it, and every external store on this jet that is not basically hard pointed on here, like one of these little guys, these LOWs, will just get launched off the dang thing. And that is used to emergency get rid of extra bags of fuel, any bombs or anything if you find yourself in a real big pinch. Right here we got the Christmas tree lights, and that's just your gear position indicator. If they're lit up, we call it the 3 green, and that means your gear is down and in a locked position. Just to the right, you get the hook. You can put the arresting hook up and down. If for some reason your brakes don't work and whatnot, you can basically drop your hook and catch a wire that's on the runway. Moving just to the right of that, you've got the landing gear lever. To make this work, you have to push this little white button on top in actual real life to actually get it to do anything. This is like a little electrical override to say I actually want you to move. And then this is a down lock release. For certain maintenance actions, we put this thing on jacks, and you actually have to push and hold that down lock release button to make the jet operate the gear when it doesn't think it's safe to. Moving up a little bit, you have your miscellaneous panel, which is all about autopilot. Pitch, altitude hold. So I want it to go at the same altitude no matter what. Attitude hold. I wanted to maintain a certain level on this ladder, up and down. You have your roll, heading selection. You basically set the aircraft in a roll, left or right, and you push that and it maintains it in that roll. You push it down for steering selection, and it will actually steer the jet for you into any position on your GPS that system that you've set in for different steer points, and you control it by pressing this guy right here. As you can see, if you watch this number right here, every time I push that button, it goes up with different steer points. The steer points can be merely navigation, or they can be used when you do GPS guided bombing, because that becomes a sensor point of interest in the GPS track. So it has a couple different purposes based on where you set your target at. Up above it, you have a master arm switch, on, off, simulate, laser arm. If I have a targeting pod on here, I can enable to disable the laser. Ecm light, if I am transmitting ECM, that'll light up green. RF, it's basically my radar status. If I want it to just be normal and it transmits and does everything as norm, it'll do it. Quiet, it reduces it. Silent, I don't want you to do anything at all. Alright, now to the point where things will get noisy for a minute. We'll go ahead and turn on the Rdbr. So you can hear a couple noises there. It told me it's on, and then the little pink sound you heard means something got added. So right here, this is telling me it's an open priority. It'll only show me the priority target, and that'll show me everything that's catching. I can do a system test. I can just go for straight target. I can go, this is my launch. This will flash and whatnot if a missile's, like it detects some missile's radar. And this is basically Seacraft. And yeah, this jet has multiple functions, so it has to have multiple abilities. There, it's coming up. Okay, so right here, you have the Rdbr Scope. This center point shows us from a top-down view with us here. We have a 40, an NS, E3, and 29 names. The diamond shows its priority because it is actually targeting us. 29 is a designation for what type of aircraft it is. In NATO-style RWR systems, a 29 can be anything Russian-related, basically, from MiGs through Sus. And 29 is just a generalized designation stating the type of radar that is hitting us. Your 40, your NS is like ground attack things, so a lot of your airfields with wartime stuff will have automatic air defenses with like flat cannons. You've got search radars, you've got little machine gun mounted trucks with little radar sea-whizzes. Oh, there you go, there's the sound. That steady sound you're hearing is actually the tracking sound. That means I am physically being blocked by something, right? I also call that the someone is looking at you kind of funny. There's a couple ways someone can look at you. You have just your general numeric that pops up here. They can see you, right? If it does this whole thing where it pops a diamond around them and it starts making that sound you were hearing, that means someone's looking at you kind of funny. And if they're looking at you kind of funny, that means that they are doing a specific radar lock on you and they're fixing to shoot you. So that's what I'm all saying when I'm like, oh, they can see you, they look at you funny, and then when it starts screaming and beep, beep, beeping and all that dumb crap, and this little launch light and everything is flashing, that means that the Rdbr system has directly sensed the radar of a missile. And it will then display a flashing numeric on where it came from. It does not exactly show where it is until the threat is close enough, i.e. the missile, that its own radar is the priority, and it will actually show an M designator that flashes. Based on it will show me where it is in relation to my jet. Now, direct up and down of me, there is a window that the Rdbr probes will not be able to sense. So when you go through a certain banking roll and whatnot, you'll actually hear it going crazy, and then it'll stop. And then when you complete the maneuver or come back facing it, it will do it again. As long as you don't expose the direct underbody or the top of the jet to the threat. Alright, moving on, we're going to go turn that off so it doesn't annoy us anymore. You have your AOA indicator here. This is saying I need to pull nose up. If there's going to be a green light right here that says I am on AOA, and there'll be a red one right here that says nose down. There it is. The whole point of that is mostly for landing. It's to get the jet kind of at an alpha that is acceptable for landing and whatnot. Likewise, on the other side, you have this little guy right here, and that is just to tell me the status of, like, if I push this button here, nose wheel steering. And I can press it again, and it goes away. We're going to do the HUD in a second, just because there's a lot of information in there, so I'll get to that. Right here, this is called the ICP. Okay? ICP is able to manipulate pretty much everything you see on here. So this is where the meat and potatoes of the jet comes in. You know how to manipulate the ICP, you can manipulate the jet. COM 1, I can change the radio stations and whatnot with this little dauber here. I can navigate through the DED, or data entry display, through what I want to manipulate. COM 2, same thing. UHF and VHF. IFF, I can set my modes to all my different transponders. List, it'll tell me all of the functions that I can mess with here. Destination, I can set my bingo, VIP, interchange, nav, manual mode, INS, data link, CMDS, or countermeasures dispense system, mode, VRP, I'm not 100% sure, and then miscellaneous, that just has a couple different things like coordinates, INSN, D-range, MACV, laser, all that good stuff. Don't really mess with that too much. I mostly just sit right here on 6 for INS. And this is lat launch, altitude, and your INS position, your latitude, longitude, altitude, and your true heading and ground speed. Jesus. Air-to-air mode, air-to-ground. If you push that, it'll activate air-to-air mode had I had anything loaded. And if I push air to ground, it automatically loads the inventory page and whatnot, so I can set up bombs, air to ground missiles, etc. Symbology, if I twist this around right here, it makes the HUD go crazy, up and down. Brightness as well. It's not typically something you mess with, really. And yeah, all these buttons, you can see exactly what they do. If you were to click the list button, you can see everything that it'll do. Mark points and whatnot. That's all important for making sensor points of interest for bomb runs and whatnot. Right here is just a dauber that controls what I'm actually looking at inside the DED. Drift coefficient, I can turn that so that the pitch ladder and whatnot will not move based on inputs from the aircraft saying I'm being pushed left, pushed right, or whatever. And then if I get a warning in the HUD, like fuel or whatnot, if it bingos, I click that down for a warning reset, I click let it go, and it'll get rid of it. And then the contrast and whatnot, this is all things you use for nighttime stuff with night vision and whatnot. The gain, all that good stuff, so we're not gonna mess with that right now, but that is everything to do with infrared. So over here to the right is the DED. We kind of already talked about that. That is just a basic entry display for data that shows us what we're manipulating via the ICP. Alright, now the HUD. Oh, the HUD. Okay. Let's get into this. On the HUD, we have a horizon line. We have a heading bar. We have an airspeed ladder, altitude ladder, range, radar altitude, and basically mission time and whatnot. We have a roll indicator of how much of a roll we're putting on the jet. Each of these lines here on the extremes show the limit as to what the autopilot will hold for us. And then here up the middle, you have a pitch ladder. The dashed means it's negative. Solids mean it's positive. Now with gear down, you get these 3 dashed lines right here with a space in the middle that have no pitch ladder information on it. That is where you want to put your flight position indicator on when you're coming in for landing, and that will help you get the jet into a proper AOA with kind of nose up, tail down, and whatnot to kind of fly itself in for a landing and whatnot. So that wasn't so bad. That symbology changes with different inputs in the cockpit. To show you all of that, I'll have to actually fly the jet and whatnot, so we'll get back to that. So moving just over here to the left, we have our FCR. The FCR does not operate on the ground, so that is not something we can realistically manipulate on the ground. Here on the right, you have another MFD, or multifunction display, that can realistically do everything the same as this one can. And I can make each of them display different things. I can take this image and I can press swap, and it will change it from left to right. It's just up to user's preference at that point. I typically like the FCR on the left, and then just generally I have the HSD, the horizontal situation display, on the right. We can go our air to ground page. It shows me my gun. I have selected strafe. I go inventory to see what all is loaded. Currently there's nothing loaded, so go back to inventory. It says the system is ready. One gun, 12,000 foot range, etc. Stores jettison. If I had anything loaded, it tells me all the pylons and whatnot. I can manually select them, press the fire button once, and it will punch everything I have selected off. So I can do select jettison rather than emergency jettison. So if we go here and we click the page we had open, this opens up the library of bullcrap that these multifunction displays can utilize. Okay, blank, we can blank it out. Harms the display. It doesn't, that's if we're using like a air-to-ground type stuff for anti-radiation. ACCE, it's not functional currently. Reset menu if you want to get back to this. Stores management system. Horizontal situation display. This is not functional right now. Test page, you can test everything. Not a lot of fun, but it's there. Flickus placeholder. Okay. You have your FCR. I can bring it over here like I said if I wanted to. Targeting pod, we do not have one loaded. Weapon, So if I have a specific weapon that has a seeker on it, like, let's say a AGM-65, a Maverick, I can actually display what it is physically seeing on this page. Then TFR and FLIR, those are things that, I'll be honest with you, I've never really messed with, and for good reason, because they don't work. Alright, so there's that. So to get into more in-depth on certain things that this will actually do and display, I'll have to actually get this thing airborne and whatnot. But for now, we'll move on. This is a backup ADI, so it shows me ground and sky and whatnot, and I can actually pull the cage to basically reset it. Fuel flow in pounds per hour. Everything in a jet is done in pounds per hour because the actual weight of fuel and density of fuel will change with altitude. So what doesn't change with, you know, altitude and whatnot? Well, the raw weight of fuel will not change. It's going to be the same weight, it's just its density will change. So the only accurate way to really determine how much is on the jet, how much we're using, is in its weight. And weight is also what matters when you're doing takeoff and landings. We don't care about how many gallons or liters it is. We give a crap about how much it weighs, right? So right here we have oil pressure indicator, nozzle position, RPM, fan turbine inlet temperature, or FTIP, fuel quantity totalizer, and a manual compass that does the same job as this guy right here in the HUD. So nozzle position and percent of open. 0 means it's full close, and 100% means it's all the way open. So that's the only kind of thing that doesn't work as you would think it does, as just looking at it. You have two different needles here for the front and aft, and if these get too far off from each other, you get an imbalance in the jet. So you want to try to keep those relatively close to each other, because if you don't, you can start having issues with balancing of the jet. Hydro pressures, there's an A and B system. Moving here in the direct middle, you've got a Mach speed indicator, an altitude indicator, an AOA indicator, which means the jet might be flying straight through the air, but it's the actual angle of the jet through the air. So that is also called alpha. We have another climb and dive ball right here. I'm not 100% sure what the true and due name of that is, but I call it the climb and dive ball. A vertical velocity indicator shows me how many, it's in feet per hour on my climb and descent rate. Moving a bit down, you have another compass, and this will display heading information, steer points and whatnot via little tags on here that it will actually place. Fuel quantity selection. You can go to test, and it will basically test the ability of the jet to sense what fuel is where. Norm, reserves first, internal wing first, external wing first, or external center first. That tells me where I want the jet to fuel from, the engine, right? And then fuel trans, norm, wing first. So you can utilize this to try and fix any imbalances here, or just to, if I have wing tanks loaded on here, I want it to drain the wing tank first, or the centerline tank first. Pedal adjust for short guys like me. You pull and hold this, and these pedals come flying forward. And it's little mechanical locks in here that you push it back to, and it does lock clunk, and you know it's locked into place. So short people can fly too. We already went over the 32 mod a little bit. The 32 mod is a basic input right here that lights up with all kinds of different information of failures. So that's not something you ever want to see lit up. If you see it lit up for some reason, it's probably not a good thing. I'm going to get rid of the throttle real quick. You got your cabin pressure with altitude. What the cabin is being pressurized to altitude-wise. You got a clock that never works on any actual jet, I promise you. And an EPU percent. 100% of the tank is left, 0. You should not see this move. If this moves, that means you are either using the EPU or there's a leak in the EPU. Both of which is very bad, because when hydrazine is exposed to oxygen, that is when the thermo reaction actually happens. Right here, real quick, we'll demonstrate. We can go seat down, seat up. Pretty neat. Here on the right, you got your sensor powers, left hard point, right hard point. On the cheeks of the jet, on the intake, you can load certain things on it, like pods, and that delivers power to those hard points. FCR, that is powering the radar up in the nose of the jet underneath this giant cone. And just to the right of that, you have the radar altitude, standby, or off. So do I want the radar altitude system to actually be working, right? Yes, I typically do. Otherwise, you have to fly this thing manually and by pneumatic sensors only. Radar altitude will basically tell you what your actual altitude is with terrain movement. And your pneumatic altitude will not, because it goes off of little probes on the front of the jet. I can't necessarily see them right now, but it goes off of those. There's like little vacuum tubes and whatnot that give it air pressure, and the air pressure is translated into an altitude and airspeed. Nuclear consent. I don't think I need to go over that. It's pretty cut, clean, dry, and simple. OFP, that is some classified shit, and if you want to get rid of it, you bring up these guards. This is typically locked in real life to where you have to physically break a piece of copper wire to get these guards to lift. And you dump data. Voice message. If you're tired of the bitch complaining at you, saying things like altitude, warning, or anything else that it's complaining about, like, I don't know, hydraulics failure or whatever, right? You can turn her off. Not recommended. But if it's, you know, broken in some way, form, or fashion, it's probably a good thing, because it can be kind of distracting with her constantly yelling at you. So here we got internal lighting. Right? Consoles, I can turn those on and off. Can't really see it too much because it's really bright out. DED display. Malin indicators, just general lighting if you want it to be dim or bright. Mod headset, work with me. Alright. CRAD, I'm going to be honest with you, I have no idea. Temperature control. What did I just manipulate? Okay. Temp control. Every jet, modern jet, I'll put it, has its own climate control. Heating, cooling, etc. When you're sitting under this dome and you're just flying through the air, it might be cold outside, but I guarantee you it's cooking inside with the sun. So as cold as it is outside, you're probably going to want this to be, you know, it automatically controls temperature. You can set it to cold, warm, it's cool and warm as well, off. Excuse me. You've got your air source, normal, dump, ram. So there's actually little ram ducts on the front of the jet. Norm means I'm actually providing engine through a turbine, or a air through a turbine system mounted inside the jet that uses engine bleed air that is pulled off the compressor to spin a turbine, which sucks in air, conditions it, and gives it to the jet. It does this for equipment cooling as well. Moving further back, you've got your oxygen panel. So PBG is pressurizing, so if you have this on, it basically, when you're pulling G's and whatnot, the jet will actually force air to you to help you breathe. And the suit and whatnot tightens up and whatnot based on this as well. You can't see the hookups here, but there's a nice suit, and I got warned when I got to fly in the jet to make sure my man junk was properly situated before I got in the jet, because if not, and that thing tightened up, it tightens up all around your legs and up to your stomach, and if it tightens up, it gets nice and tight. I'll just leave it at that. Let your imaginations go wild. Up here to the side, you have your KY-58. There's some more classified things. That being said, I have no idea what it does, and I doubt it really has an actual function in the game. You've got your oxygen and PSI pressure, your flow indicator. Emergency means it goes to emergency mode, right? Test mass, you can get it to flow, just non-stop. 100% oxygen, normal, it just doesn't mix. Pretty simple. Anti-ice. Okay, anti-ice. When you get to flying through nice and cold air, and there's some moisture, the pressure differences in the engine inlet can cause ice to start forming on the engine inlet, and that's never a good thing. Because ice, you wouldn't think it does too much, but good lord does it mess up engine blades. It's not necessarily the ice that goes down in chunks, because it doesn't get that opportunity, but it's actually forms on the leading edge of the blade, and when that a little bit of ice breaks off, it causes a massive disturbance in loading of the blade. It actually causes it to bend. Pretty interesting science. It's not the ice being there that bends it, it's the release of the ice on the blade that causes it to bend. Pretty interesting stuff. Moving here, your antenna selection for IFF, UHF. There's actually multiple different antennas on the jet. Here's your Avionics power panel. MMC is a computer in here that takes all of this information and interprets it and says, yes, this is this. And it displays everything. So without that, this jet just does not work. Mfds, this is just general power for different things like Mfds, these screens right here. GPS, data link, MIDS, communication between other jets, your INS or internal navigation system, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's kind of a rough representation of what this all is. I might not be 100% on everything, but this is a general idea, and you'll kind of know what I'm getting at when I talk about things now. So forgive me for any little bits that might be a little bit off. Again, I'm not an avionics troop, so, you know, I don't know absolutely everything about what goes inside of this cockpit. Oh, this is the D-ring. You can probably imagine why it's called that. If you're sitting here, it's pretty close to, you know, the D. And for those of the more mature-minded, it's kind of in the shape of a D. You pull that with about 40 pounds of force, this whole thing goes bye-bye. That is the ejection handle. Okay. Manual chute. That's only important after you've been in the air and all of a sudden your parachute's not coming out for some ungodly reason. The green ring, we call it. There's actually there it is, oxygen bottle attached to the chair and provides oxygen for about 10 minutes. So if you're up really, really high, and you have your mask on and stuff still, it'll actually keep you alive and let you be able to breathe while you're floating down to Earth with your parachute. Probably just had one of the worst days of your life. And you're like a half-inch shorter for the rest of your life. But, moving on. I'm going to go ahead and load this thing up. We're going to get in the air so I can show you a little bit different displays. Alright, we're up and active. I loaded the jet up with some missiles, a single bomb, a little bit of fuel so I can have some winter time, and I put both the harms targeting system and the targeting pod on the jet for demonstrations purposes. So over here on the left, remember that little page that we got on the right side? Publish harms as display, and I have an HTS or harms on the jet. I can get this screen right here. So this little white ring will change based on my aircraft input, altitude, speed. And that shows anything inside this ring I can shoot at and kill with the harms. That shows their capability. Not soy just means I don't have that as sense of interest, which means I can't manipulate that right now. If I push DMS down, you get this little white box that appears, and I can then manipulate the little target designator cursor right there. We can have basic range on how far we want it to see. And again, this reflects a lot of the information that the HSD gets, or Link 16, which we'll get into that. You get normal mode, threat mode, centerline, grayscale, EOM. You leave most of this alone. Its default mode is pretty decent. So you'll actually see right here, these are friendly, so I'm not going to engage them. But SS, SS, those are radar emittance from somewhere on the ground. It's a ground threat. Typically a boat. It's probably that guy right there. And that guy right there. Yeah, it's about almost off my right wing. It makes sense. That's them. Cool. And I can lock them and shoot harms at them if I have harms. And it will go and just try to destroy that radar emittance. HARM stands for High Speed Anti-Radiation Missile. So anything that emits radar, the harm doesn't like, and the harm intends to destroy it when you tell it, I want you to go up that specific. Alright, so nothing really in the HUD has changed at this point. It's most of the same information. The only thing that's changed is the heading indicator is now down here instead of up here. We now have this little aircraft obby looking dude here that kind of looks like an F-16 from behind. That is the flight path indicator, which shows at the current inputs I have the jet at, this is where the jet is going to end up, somewhere out here. Airspeed in knots, altitude, radar altitude. So this is pneumatic, that's actual radar altitude. This is our altitude warning bell. This is our time until we reach a waypoint that we have selected. And this is just basic information. I'm not 100% sure what that is. Same things though, pitch ladder, you can actually see the dashed lines and the solid lines. That's -5, that's +5. This is on heading 0 for 0 degrees pitch up and down. You can see that no jet just flies at 0 degrees AOA. No jet just flies straight. They all fly with a slight nose-up attitude to give them lift. So, there you go. If you didn't know that, now you know. So that's almost all we have to talk about the harms this way. It's very simple. You see something you want to kill, you tell it I want it dead, you press the fire launch button, and you shoot. Over here to the right, we have the targeting pod. Now, we all know what a targeting pod is. It is a little dude that hangs off the right cheek of the inlet, and it is used for target identification and target, like, you can visually see something got destroyed, or you can use it for visual ID, or just basic reconnaissance. You can zoom in, zoom out. Right now I'm just kind of looking at the clouds and whatnot. We can go white hot, TV mode, or black hot, and then TV mode. Typically I like white hot. You can go wide, it's just the zoom button that I put in there. The targeting pod is an extremely difficult thing to know how to manipulate entirely. You can have the level of brightness to help you out here to show contrast, so a very white surface. So like out here, if I wanted to see something, I would have to put it at a very high contrast as such. And I can use the contrast buttons here as well. And then just overall brightness to just help me see what I'm supposed to be looking at, because as great as the targeting pod is, they have their limitations. Okay. Alright, so that's enough to do with the targeting pod. Not exactly the most intelligent on it, but it's alright. Let's go back to the HSD. So HSD is a horizontal situations display, and it's a top-down view with that being our aircraft. And this little cone you see out front is what this radar page will display. I can jump that range out, and you can see that cone will start to get bigger. Now, go ahead and go to Master R on. You can see that we're in strafe mode right here. This is going to tell us what weapon we're trying to utilize. That means STRF is strafe, so go. Second. Right? This is a target circle. Anything I want dead, I put in there on that little dot. Right here we can show 120 miles, 240 miles, 60 miles, 30 miles, 15. I typically keep it about 60. The HSD is just kind of helping you keep aware of what's kind of around you. You can transmit, so whatever I'm seeing via my radar or not, I will let other aircraft to have this type of system see. And this is all just kind of specific things that aren't really necessary for what I'm trying to do. So I don't really mess with those too much. I just care about what I'm able to see. Okay, moving on. Let's go ahead and push air to ground. We'll go to our source management. So now you remember it was just these lights. Now you can see everything I have loaded. 9X, 120, another 120, a Mark 82 bomb, a tank, another Mark 82, a 120, and a 9X. That correlates to these positions right here. I can go to select jettison, Select jettison. And I can tell it I want, let's say I want, you know, that one. We'll get into that because I don't want to ruin my ability to do something. Okay, technical difficulty resolved. Okay, we got our inventory switch here. What is there? What mode we're in? It says it's ready. It's got the gun. And it tells me how many rounds I have left in that, 450. Ranging. If I push inventory, it doesn't have those loaded. Sweet! So apparently there's something wrong with the jet. Imagine that. And the weapon system is like, I'm not doing that. So normally, I can get in there and I can set, that'll have to be, I guess, another video for another time. But we'll go ahead and do the air-to-air stuff. I'll show you guys some of that. Storage jettison. Storage jettison. There we go. And I want to get rid of that Mark 82s. Later. And they're away. Okay. Air-to-air mode. Okay. So a little bit on the HUD's changed. Mainly this giant ring. This ring is called the Mad Dog Circle. Anything within 10 miles, and inside this ring, if I shoot these medium-range missiles, or AMRAAMs, will track and kill the first thing they see inside this Mad Dog Circle. For obvious reasons, that's not necessarily the best thing to do, because it doesn't care if it's friendly or not. So, we don't want to just kill off a bunch of friendlies, so we don't typically handle that like that. But in certain situations, it's important to be able to get the jet right. Hold on a second, turn this around. We'll go to waypoint. That's fine. Back out. Trim adjustment. This thing is not evenly loaded right now, so you have to. I just kind of hastily put everything on there to make the video go around. Okay, so we have our self-air-to-air mode. This shows that I have 3 A120Cs. They're slave to the radar and what stations I have them on. So let's get off that, go back to the HSD because it's not necessarily required. Over here on the left, we have an actual radar image. These blue bars show the extent to the left and right scan that I'm utilizing. I can utilize it to change to 10 degrees or 60. You can see this little blue dude going crazy. That is the actual position of the radar going left and right. So I can constrain it to here. Much faster scan in this area. Bars, otherwise known as this guy that goes up and down, I can limit it to going up and down. Just not at all. 2 bars, so 2 degrees up and down, 3, then 4. And you guys should see here on the TDC, that number, those numbers change. And that's just the upper and lower altitude of what I'm scanning. So right here is a waypoint that's being displayed. This is information being fed to me via the HSD because it's outside these blue bars. There's no way I could be scanning what that is. That is being fed from this guy right here, the HSD, the link. Which you can see here, the ranging. The blue cone showing what this radar is actually seeing. So what I'm seeing on this screen is that bandit right there. He's on the far right extreme of my radar. You can see the far right extreme of my radar right there, about 20, 40, 60, so just under 40 miles away. This goes out to 80 miles right now, so a little bit under half, just under 40. Look at that. So right now he is an unknown. So we're going to go to TMS left short. You'll see the word scan popped up. And you'll see if he's a friendly. You can see if you watch the yellow guy again. TMS left. And he pops up green. That means don't shoot me. These little antennas right here, I sent out a transponder request from the aircraft. And he responded back with, I'm a friendly. So we're going to go ahead and lock set friendly just for the hell of it. give it a 1 for a bug, nothing changes. But if I go to other targets that are within the same blue lines, as long as I keep him inside of it, I can bug other targets, and I can track them all at the same time, and I can then switch between what targets I want to hit based on TMS right to cycle through targets, and I can shoot multiple missiles on multiple targets at once. So if I go again, TMS up one more time, he's actually locked now. That is a friendly, so we're not going to shoot him, but a couple things have changed. You have a steering circle, a steering error circle, sorry, and a steering dot. And as long as I keep that dot inside that steering circle, that gives the missile the proper lead. You can actually see FO, which is range to target, 32 miles. Time until I merge with the target. Altitude of myself. Speed of myself. Not a lot has changed, right? You can see the square box with the target. That is what the radar is specifically telling me he is right now, right? And there's a little dot right here on the left side of this circle. Right here, this little dude shows his movement compared to mine, which is off to the right. So the more over to the right it is, the more right it is. If it's coming directly at me, it'll be at the bottom, etc. So right here with this on the bottom says it's moving away and to the right. And we can actually see that here with the little needle off the front of his target, away and to the right. His altitude is displayed on the radar as 21, so 21,000 feet. I can manipulate my radar up and down if I'm not tracking him, so I'll unlock him, and I'll manipulate the radar way above him. And he's gone. If I bring it back down, it pops up again, because I'm physically moving what the radar is scanning at what altitude, displayed by these two numbers right here. So like I said, range, azimuth limitations, bars. Pretty simple stuff. Now along with the radar, we've got the HSD, or the Hmcs. So if I lock set friendly again, and I bring myself off nose right, like so, my helmet will be activated. So on the helmet, a lot of the same information. This is a range bar, a closure rate, miles, so we're about halfway. It's about 32 miles. Max, minimum, distance to pit bull or automatic missile tracking. This right here shows a priority threat, 29, which means I'm getting 29 nails. This diamond shows its radar emittance, like where it's seeing it from. This little slit is where I'm looking. So if I look right there, I line that slit with the diamond, and that means I'm directly looking at what that is in that direction. This little diamond in the middle is just a designator. I can actually use that to set a point. I see something in the ground, it's like, oh, I want to blow that up. I'll look at it, set it. I can set my targeting pod to look at what I just said, and I can finalize the target on the targeting pod. We have a heading bar, so wherever I'm specifically looking, it shows the heading. It shows my weapon status, armed, what I have selected. G's, knots, altitude, range to what I have targeted, and then just some general information. I'm not 100% sure what that is. So we're going to go ahead and nose off again, because I'm actually closing on him again. And one interesting thing the Hmcs system does is it will use the radar's information, and you can actually see the box that was in my HUD, and it gives me his altitude. So I can visually see the target as it's in the air, because the helmet is projecting its position on the screen for me. So that kind of goes over that. We'll have to go over a couple different things once I actually kill targets and whatnot. I'll have to remember to talk about them. But right now, there's just not really a lot up in the air. We're just kind of up here owning the airspace. We're not really sharing it with anybody, so yeah. Okay, I think that about does it for right now. We're going to go ahead and unlock him, because that's probably annoying the living crap out of him. I know it would annoy me. So we're going to go ahead and unlock that guy. we're gonna find our airfield and we're gonna land. And yeah, this is I hope it's been educational for you guys. I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty boring just going over every little thing, to be honest with you. But I mean, hey, what do, you know? If I don't let people know kind of what I'm talking about, it's just kind of gibberish for everybody, and it's not as fun, right? So we're gonna do what every mad scientist does. We're going to press our emergency jettisons button. I'm gonna get outside the jet for you guys to see it, so you guys can see it dump its tanks. Get this trim right, and then we'll close out this video.